In this Diablo 4 video, I'll be showing you my Nature's Fury build. This is a level 50 plus Druid build that is aimed at World Tier 3 and makes use of the Nature's Fury key passive skill. So let's start off by taking a look at Nature's Fury. This makes it so that when you cast an Earth skill, you have a 20% chance to trigger a free Storm skill of the same category, so the same little cluster. And in addition, if you cast a Storm skill, it has a 20% chance to trigger a free Earth skill, again, triggering one in the same node as it or the same cluster. So obviously this rewards you for using both Earth and Storm magic. Now there are a couple legendary aspects that make this particularly deadly, and the first one is the symbiotic aspect. This makes it so that when you trigger that free skill, your non-ultimate cooldowns of the opposite type are reduced by up to 8 seconds. So for instance, let's just say you're standing there spamming away with Storm Strike and you trigger an Earth Spike. Well, then you basically trigger Nature's Fury's passive, so then all the other skills that are Earth skills would gain 8 seconds reduction in their cooldown. So if you did this with Earth Spike until you got Storm Strike to trigger, you would essentially gain the opposite, and all your Storm skills would gain a 8-second cooldown, or up to 8 seconds. So for this build, we're using Storm Strike because we want to apply Vulnerable, but we also want to cool down Earth skills. If you wanted to cool down Storm skills again, you would use an Earth skill here. But we want to cool down Earth skills, and that's because they have both Earth and Bulwark, and in this case, Trample. Earth and Bulwark gives you a huge damage shield and makes you unstoppable, makes you damn near unkillable in part of the later parts of the game. And by refreshing this constantly, you're going to have a constant damage shield that protects you and prevents you from taking damage and allows you to move around un-CC. And because we have the aspect of Trampled Earth, Trample now becomes a Nature Magic and Earth skill, so it's going to get its cooldown refreshed, and it's going to do 6 landslides during its duration as well, so it's going to just pummel the screen with a huge AoE. So the idea here is that when you go into combat, you're going to pop Earth and Bulwark so you're protected, and then you're going to use Trample into the middle of a group of enemies, hitting them all with all the landslides that go behind you, and then you're either going to use something like Hurricane, or you're going to use something like Cyclone Armor and start spamming Storm Strike in order to try and reset the cooldown on Earth and Bulwark and Landslide, and just keep alternating this way over and over and over. In this case, I'm using Tornado here, because I wanted to put something out that would continue to swirl around and deal damage, also slow enemies down, allowing us to take advantage of, damage versus crowd control and stuff like that. But the tornadoes will continue to swirl around on the battlefield while we're attacking with landslides, which has kind of a nice synergy here. And if you don't have something like, Tornado or another storm skill that takes advantage of your spirit, it just sits there and you don't really gain any use of it. So again, you charge in, use Earth and Bulwark, use Landslide, spam Tornado, try and, get them up on the battlefield. Hopefully one of them triggers the reset of these and you use it. If not, you're going to use Storm Strike, or you can use Hurricane or Cyclone Armor. I've opted for Cyclone Armor here to give you a little bit more protection. It also has a chance to trigger a lot more defensive passes because it's in the defensive cluster. So it can trigger Debilitating Roar, it can trigger Bloodhowl, and it can also trigger Earth and Bulwark, again giving you extra Earth and Bulwarks, which can be useful if you're fighting like really high versions or very high tiers of Nightmare Dungeons. You might opt for Hurricane if you're looking for a little more damage on lower versions. The nice thing about Hurricane as well is when you trigger it, you might get a chance to trigger Trample, giving you even more tramples. So we get even more damage out of Trample here by taking the aspect of Aftershock, which makes it so that every time you summon a Landslide Pillar, you actually get a second pillar that deals a little bit extra damage. So those 6 Landslide Pillars you get from Trample because of the aspect of the Trampled Earth will also now double that. So you're going to have a lot of pillars on the ground. We also invest heavily in the Landslide skill in order to gain even more damage from this when we do it. And I've also got Cataclysm here as my ultimate ability, and what I really like about Cataclysm is that you throw it up and then you can keep doing what you want to do. Like, it just goes off, deals damage to everything on the screen, CCs things, makes them vulnerable, and it does a lot of damage while you're free to just keep moving around with your character and attacking. And it's great for those situations where you need a little extra burst damage. I'm also taking advantage of the aspect of Natural Balancer, which makes it so casting a Storm skill grants your Earth skills up to 45% critical strike damage for 4 seconds, and casting an Earth skill increases your critical strike chance of your Storm skills by up to 12% for 4 seconds, and it's doubled on a two-handed weapon, which I have it on my two-handed weapon here. So this is incredible. That means when you use Trample, you're going to gain up to 24% critical strike chance on your Tornadoes, and when you use Tornadoes, or if you use Hurricane or Cyclone Armor, or if you use Storm Strike, your next Trample for 4 seconds is going to gain up to 90% critical strike damage if you have this maxed out on a two-handed weapon. That's huge. We're also taking advantage of the Obsidian Slam Spirit Boon that says every 20th kill, you'll cause your next Earth skill to overpower. Trample is our only Earth skill here. This means Trample is going to be the skill that overpowers every time, and this is great because this skill hits like a truck. So you're going to get frequent overpowers with this as well. Defensively, we're using the aspect of Mending Stone, which increases the duration of Earthen Bulwark by 6 seconds up to 9 seconds. And killing enemies with Earth skills, or in this case, Trample, will also replenish some of your active Bulwark barrier. And this is going to help protect you while you're running around with your barrier up. You're going to have frequent barriers, but this is going to, make sure that your Earthen Bulwark is very, very useful. Earthen Bulwark is a difficult skill to use without this aspect, in my opinion, simply because 3 seconds is not that long of a damage shield. So out of all of the things here, there are a lot that make this build really, really good. But this one's really, really important. If you're going to use Earthen Bulwark, you definitely want this aspect. I also have the Earthguard aspect here, which gives you up to a 25% bonus amount of your next Earthen Bulwark for each enemy you crowd control up to 100%. So if you had max, you CC'd 4 enemies, like slowed them or knocked them back or whatever, rooted them, you would gain even more damage shield. This is really, really good, particularly on higher levels of the game, because you need all the protection you can get. And then, of course, I have aspect of the Protector as well. This gives you a damage shield when you're fighting an elite for 10 seconds. This is where you really need your damage shield. So you're going to have Earthen Bulwark, a souped-up Earthen Bulwark, this on top of it, all the damage reductions you gain from, all the other things. This is very, very strong. And when it comes to the glyph, I like to use Shapeshifter for this. This makes it so that Shapeshifting has a 20% chance to cause the skill's damage to critically strike. Trample is our only Shapeshifting ability on here, so when you Shapeshift into the bearer to do Trample, you're going to get an automatic 20% chance to critically strike with this on top of your crit chance already. That's a huge amount. And because you're getting the extra critical damage from the aspect of Natural Balance as well, when you do critically strike, you're just going to hit really, really hard, particularly if you're overpowering at the same time. From here, I like to head into the Ancestral Guidance board, and that's because there's a little cluster here that gives you higher Spirit and also Spirit back on kill, and this is going to allow you to spam Tornado more and get extra damage out of that, so you're not just depending completely on your Trample for damage. And also, once you get the Legendary Node there, it says after spending 75 Spirit, you deal 30% increased damage for 5 seconds. Basically, if you cast 2 tornadoes, you have 30% damage for 5 seconds, which is huge. That'll apply to everything that you do, which is great. So all that said, to get this going may seem like you need a lot of specific equipment, and you do need a couple of things, but the most important ones are the Symbiotic aspect, which gives you the cooldowns when you trigger the free Nature's Fury passive, and also the one that makes Trample into an Earth skill, so aspect of the Trampled Earth. Those two you need for this build. All the others are just kind of icing on the cake. They make it better, but those are the two you actually need. And it's not hard to get both of those. You might not get the best rolls on them, but that'll get you going with this build. And then as you acquire the other pieces, the build will just get stronger and stronger. And if you wanted to play this build without having Trample in it, which, you could until you got that aspect we were talking about earlier parts of the game, you could use Boulder in its place in order to have a skill that has a cooldown that deals decent damage. The problem with Boulder is it has a much narrower lane of damage, so you have to be a lot more accurate with your cast, but it still does really, really good damage. So you could use that until you get this if you're talking like between levels 1 and 50 or something like that. So that wraps up the Nature's Fury build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is probably going to be the last Tier 3 Druid build I do. Following up with this, we're going to move on to Tier 4 for Druid builds.